Starting today, my husband wants us to live with my parents. I was caught off guard by this sudden suggestion. We just said goodbye to my father, who recently passed away after being sick for a long time. Despite the sadness of the funeral still lingering, my husband packed up and left our house. He said we're moving to a villa my father left me. When we got there, my in-laws were already settled in. My name's Natalie, I'm 33, and I'm a designer who's just started living on my own. I've been living with Justin for 3 years now since we got married. My career as a designer is flourishing and I'm known in my field. I earn well enough to have the apartment under my name. Sadly, my mother passed away during my college years, and last year, my father was diagnosed with cancer. Despite his brave fight, the disease progressed, and the doctors warned us to prepare for the worst. My father has always been there for me, especially since I started working. He's been a constant support and a vital part of my life. Learning about my father's illness shook me to the core. As his health deteriorated, I couldn't sleep, consumed by worry and fear. My husband asked about my dad's condition often, but his concern felt hollow. It seemed like he was waiting for the worst to happen. He's always felt insecure about earning less than me, and I wished he'd take pride in my success and be there for me when times get tough. He had a playful side, always wanting to win, even in simple things. My dad assured us not to worry and to focus on our relationship, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we should visit him while we still can. I was finding it harder to hide my growing frustration with my husband. In the beginning, our marriage was full of love and joy, but his insensitive comments about my dad's illness changed things. I realized he wasn't the same loving husband anymore. He works from home and thinks having someone around distracts me, but I plan to work from home too once I'm independent. I decided to rent a small office and commute, making it easier for me to visit the hospital. Meanwhile, my husband stayed home, leaving all the household chores for me to handle. Juggling work, taking care of my father, and coming home exhausted, I often found a mess waiting for me, with dishes left unwashed. It was clear he only thought of himself, disregarding my feelings. Living with him made me realize how little he understood me, leaving me feeling deeply lonely. Then my father passed away. We had already sold our family home as we had discussed with him. As I busied myself with funeral arrangements, my husband seemed distant, more focused on phone calls or disappearing altogether. I pleaded with Justin to help me during this difficult time, but his phone interrupted our conversation. When he finally hung up, he brushed off my request, claiming he was busy with work calls. My frustration with him grew, especially amidst the turmoil of losing my father. His demeanor had turned colder, leaving me feeling even sadder. On the day of the funeral, Justin spent a long time chatting with his parents, leaving me feeling alone among the attendees. Despite the tension, the funeral proceeded smoothly, and we were able to wrap up the proceedings without any major issues. Out of the blue, my husband suggested we move in with his parents, as if it were the most natural thing to do. He even joked about divorce if I disagreed. I couldn't believe how casually he said it, especially considering the recent loss of my father. Fueled by grief and frustration, I retorted, "Live with them where? We don't even have a spare room here." In truth, one room in our apartment served as my husband's workspace, filled with his work stuff. Despite us not having kids, he used the space as if it were his own personal domain. "It's the villa you inherited," he said with a grin. I was taken aback. While we'd sold the family home, the villa held special memories of my father and me. I was determined to keep it that way. But my husband didn't seem to care about my feelings and kept pushing his own agenda. Living in that villa would be tough, I tried to explain, but he brushed it off. His parents had already made plans to move there, likely arranged during the funeral. With its spaciousness and peaceful setting, it was probably an appealing choice for them. Their move was already in motion, leaving no room for me to object. Every time I tried to speak up, my husband's disapproval was evident. "You're always thinking about yourself. Your constant absence because of your father's illness and emergencies has taken a toll on me. Do you even realize how much I've had to endure because of your obsession with your father?" His words were harsh, plunging my world into darkness. "Now that your father is gone, you need to listen to me." His year-long struggle was too much to bear. His callous remarks cut deep, leaving me in disbelief. I didn't want to accept that this was who my husband truly was, but it was clear he had little regard for my father or me. I couldn't shake the memory of my father's pain during his final days in the hospital. My father wouldn't have wanted me to just follow my husband's orders, leaving me behind. And he certainly wouldn't have wanted me to abandon my own feelings. In that moment, any love I had for my husband seemed to disappear. I couldn't shake the feeling of bitterness knowing he was excited about the villa while I was still mourning my father's death. Despite my emotions, I tried to warn him. Living in a villa might not turn out as you expect. I highly doubt that, was his response. With that, I had to accept his decision. I packed only the essentials and left our home. My husband looked puzzled at my sparse belongings, but I simply told him, I'll come back for the rest later. I couldn't bear to exchange any more words with him. It was painful to see the faces of my in-laws, who I imagined were eagerly awaiting my father's death and were now happily moving into the villa. I followed my husband in silence, unable to bear the thought of my cherished place being taken over by his desires. While technically a villa, it's more like a cozy family home by the sea, nestled in a neighborhood where life is simple and peaceful. Despite its tranquil surroundings, it's conveniently close to the city center, making it a valuable piece of property. As I stepped out of the station, memories of my childhood flooded back. I remembered how my father used to carry me home on his back after I fell asleep on the train ride. When we reached the villa, my in-laws were already there. I couldn't shake the feeling of suspicion, realizing that my husband must have secretly given them a key without my knowledge. This discovery only added to my unease. The realization that my in-laws had schemed to move into the villa without informing anyone only deepened my mistrust. As I looked around, I could see the excitement in their eyes as they envisioned their future in this home. Despite being a single-family house, it was filled with sturdy furniture chosen by my father and slightly different European-style decor that must have appealed to my mother. "What a beautiful villa. It's simply perfect," they exclaimed. "Goodbye to that cramped apartment. We're so fortunate to be able to live here now. The view from the second floor is breathtaking. Your father was clever to keep such a wonderful home a secret. We should all enjoy it together, as a family." Their enthusiastic remarks only fueled my irritation. It seemed like they didn't fully grasp the weight of my father's passing and simply saw the villa as a luxurious home they lucked into. Truly, both the location and the house are perfect. "We're lucky your father left us this splendid villa. We owe him our thanks," my husband chimed in, joining his insensitive parents in laughter. They cracked open beers to celebrate the move, oblivious to the solemnity of the occasion. I sighed as I prepared snacks, watching them tarnish the precious memories I had of my parents at the dining table. I chose to bury my feelings and endure the night. The next morning, the tranquility of the villa was shattered by my mother-in-law's piercing scream. I instantly knew something was wrong. As I woke up and hurried to investigate, I found my father-in-law and husband causing a commotion, slightly delayed in reaching the source of the scream. In the bathroom, my mother-in-law lay on the floor, clutching her foot with a panicked look. "The floor collapsed under me," she gasped, clearly shaken by the sudden event. "But the floor seems fine. You must have just slipped, right?" My husband and father-in-law seemed oblivious to the severity of the situation as they examined the spot she indicated. However, the floorboards appeared smooth and undamaged. Despite their reassurances, she remained adamant. "My father wouldn't have wanted me to just follow my husband's orders, leaving me behind. And he certainly wouldn't have wanted me to abandon my own feelings." In that moment, any love I had for my husband seemed to disappear. I couldn't shake the feeling of bitterness knowing he was excited about the villa while I was still mourning my father's death. Despite my emotions, I tried to warn him, living in the villa might not turn out as you expect. I highly doubt that, was his response. With that, I had to accept his decision. I packed only the essentials and left our home. My husband looked puzzled at my sparse belongings, but I simply told him, I'll come back for the rest later. I couldn't bear to exchange any more words with him. It was painful to see the faces of my in-laws, who I imagined were eagerly awaiting my father's death and were now happily moving into the villa. As they examined the floor, I was certain it had collapsed. "Have you tried stepping on that slightly different colored part of the floor?" I questioned. Their expressions shifted to surprise as they focused on the spot I indicated. Stepping between them, I leaned forward and pressed my slippered foot on the distinct section. Whoa, what was that? The floorboard made a distinct sound and gave slightly under my weight, snapping back into place when I lifted my foot. If someone unknowingly stepped on it, they'd think the floor had collapsed. "See, the floor sinks a bit. It's like a trap," I explained. "What?" That's dangerous. Is this house defective? They exclaimed. Calmly, I clarified, it's not a defect. My father intentionally installed it in this house. Why would he do that? They asked incredulously. It's what you'd call a mechanical mansion or a trick house, I revealed. As they examined the floor, I was certain it had collapsed. Have you tried stepping on that slightly different colored part of the floor? I questioned. Their expressions shifted to surprise as they focused on the spot I indicated. Stepping between them, I leaned forward and pressed my slippered foot on the distinct section. Whoa, what was that? The floorboard made a distinct sound and gave slightly under my weight, snapping back into place when I lifted my foot. If someone unknowingly stepped on it, they'd think the floor had collapsed. See, the floor sinks a bit. It's like a trap, I explained. What? That's dangerous. Is this house defective? They exclaimed. Calmly, I clarified. It's not a defect. My father intentionally installed it in this house. Why would he do that? They asked incredulously. It's what you'd call a mechanical mansion or a trick house, I revealed. In reality, my father was a devoted ninja enthusiast. This villa was his pride and joy, a treasure he poured his heart and soul into. As a child, I often tagged along while he tinkered with the house's mechanisms or added new ones. That's why there are traps and hidden mechanisms scattered throughout. A shelf you shouldn't touch, a floorboard that gives way when stepped on, a door that requires a specific sequence to open, concealed passageways, and even secret rooms. Every corner of this villa is infused with my father's dreams and ingenuity, cultivated over many years. While it's perfectly suitable for everyday living for me, who grew up here and learned how to navigate all the traps from my father, it's a different story for my husband and in-laws, who are unfamiliar with its quirks. I did warn you that living here would be challenging, and I also mentioned that it's a place filled with my father's memories. My father's intense ninja obsession is pretty well known among her relatives. It's surprising you didn't know, I remarked. Initially, my husband denied any knowledge, but now he seemed speechless. My in-laws were equally taken aback by this revelation. With our apartment lease already canceled and nowhere else to go, they turned to my husband for guidance on what to do next. Amidst the chaos, both my father-in-law and husband inadvertently triggered another trap, causing them to stumble. As I watched them sprawled on the ground, I couldn't help but chuckle. Feel free to make yourselves comfortable for as long as you need, I said, my tone more sarcastic than welcoming. They had been enamored by the villa's luxury, ignoring my warnings and showing little interest in my father's peculiar hobbies. Now, they were experiencing the consequences of their oversight. Even my attempts to explain the dangers of the traps fell on deaf ears. It's no big deal. We'll get used to it, my husband insisted confidently, and I responded with a knowing smile. I'll head back to the apartment to get things ready for our move, I told them before leaving them at the villa. However, the truth was, I had no plans for moving preparations. Instead, I intended to take a few days off to sort through my father's belongings. As expected, just 2 days later, my husband and in-laws had had enough. During that brief period, I found comfort in being alone, allowing me to slowly regain a sense of positivity as I planned my next steps. Before long, my father's villa gained attention as a unique attraction in the neighborhood. It became known as the Trick Mansion and was regularly featured in local newsletters. Curious visitors would stop by whenever the villa was unoccupied. Looking back, I remembered strangers touring the villa and local children playing nearby, making it a vibrant spot in the community. My father had listed both the villas and our old home's phone numbers in the newsletters. However, with the family home sold, any inquiries would now come to the villa's number. Thanks to my upbringing, I was able to handle calls from foreign visitors as I was proficient in foreign languages. However, my husband and in-laws struggled with foreign languages. In addition to the stress of navigating the villa's traps, they were overwhelmed by unexpected visitors and foreign language calls. Exhausted and sleep-deprived, they retreated to the apartment. Why don't we all just live here together? My husband suggested. After eagerly awaiting my father's passing to claim the villa, they were ready to give it up after just 2 days. Instead of offering them tea, I handed my husband divorce papers that I had already prepared and signed. There's no way we can live together under these circumstances. If you understand, please leave quickly, I said with a heavy heart. I couldn't forgive him for disregarding my feelings and acting insensitively without consulting me or providing any explanation. My husband decided that we would move in with his parents, leaving me with all the household responsibilities, as he had never shared them before. Feeling trapped, I confronted him about his selfish decision-making and disregard for my feelings. What happened to the love you used to show me? I couldn't help but laugh at his obliviousness. How could I love someone who wished for my father's death and would rejoice when he passed? Handing him only the divorce papers, I escorted them out of the apartment. Firstly, this is my apartment. If anyone should leave, it's you. Despite my calm demeanor, my husband raised his voice, showing no concern for our neighbors. However, I remained firm. Natally, I'll call the police for trespassing. If you don't want that, leave quietly. Their voices fell silent upon realizing the apartment was in my name. They relied on me financially and didn't have much of their own. However, I had already made up my mind to sever ties before they could begin their lengthy persuasions. Both my husband and in-laws had limited savings. After being forced out of the apartment and unable to return to the villa, they settled into a cheap, low-quality apartment, struggling to make ends meet. They often reminisced about the previous apartment, considering it better. Initially, my husband felt remorseful and apologized frequently. However, as time passed, he became resentful of his parents. With their advancing age, they rarely found stable employment, depleting their savings and pension. Each move only exacerbated their familial discord, as they argued constantly within the thin walls of the apartment. Despite receiving noise complaints, they refused to apologize and instead retaliated, leading to strained relationships with their neighbors. They may soon need to search for another place to live. While my husband used to enjoy working from home, the current apartment lacked the luxury of a dedicated workspace. Struggling to focus on his work, his professional standing and sales took a nosedive. Now he barely makes ends meet with a late-night job at a convenience store and may need to take on multiple part-time gigs to survive. His in-laws regretted allowing their son to dictate their decisions, blaming him for their predicament during their frequent arguments. If only you had been more responsible, we wouldn't be in this mess. You should have double-checked everything. Don't pin the blame on me. She's the one who kept things hidden, they argued. I remained silent as they continued their accusations. If only you had communicated better with your father, none of this would have happened. I never imagined we'd end up like this because of our son, they lamented. Yet they had always harbored hopes of inheriting the villa and were elated when my father passed away. I'll never forget that. Following the divorce, I made significant progress in my career as a designer. To cope with my father's passing and these turbulent events, I incorporated ninja elements into my designs, sharing them on social media platforms. Their popularity surged, catching the attention of a major cosmetics company. To my surprise, they approached me for a project, designing packaging with an Asian flair, incorporating ninja elements. It felt like a way to honor my father's memory, so I eagerly accepted the opportunity and poured myself into the work. The project was a resounding success, propelling my career to new heights. With joy in my heart, I shared updates at my parents' graves, grateful for the chance to honor their memory in such a meaningful way. I chose to keep the mechanical house, preserving it as a special place brimming with memories of my father. I began organizing tours and transformed it into a space where both tourists and local children could enjoy themselves free of charge. Soon, the house gained significant media attention, providing much-needed income to cover ongoing expenses. Additionally, online articles about the house were translated into foreign languages, garnering support from international fans. Some of the donations even came from elderly individuals who shared my father's passion for ninjas. I'm committed to maintaining this enchanting place for years to come. Meanwhile, the mechanical house remains a lively center of activity, especially beloved by local children. Is this the famous mechanical house? Where are the surprises? Show us. With the help of dedicated local volunteers, precautions are taken to ensure the children can play safely. Foreign tourists are often amazed by features like the hidden floorboard doors. Wow, this is incredible. I'm so touched to experience such a unique place. What other surprises await? Despite losing my father and going through a divorce over the villa's inheritance, I believe the gains have outweighed the losses. The villa has evolved into a treasure trove of memories shared with loved ones. Through it all, I've experienced personal growth, embracing the future with renewed optimism and hope.